Two kindergarten girls were sexually abused at a school in Badlapur, Maharashtra, raising serious concerns about safety in educational institutions. This even as doctors are out in the streets demanding justice for their colleague in Kolkata who was raped and brutally murdered. Gender-based violence at the workplace is being debated again, even as a minor girl was gang raped in a bus in Uttarakhand recently. And let's not forget, just a few days ago, we also saw a woman from Bihar getting stabbed by a man she knew in Bengaluru in her PG. From an 8-year-old to an 80-year-old, there are questions of safety being raised. Are our laws enough? Is our policing system really broken? Is this a problem of entrenched misogyny that will need more than CCTV cameras and gender workshops to be fixed? That's what we will try and understand tonight. We, of course, are joined by a panel of experts. We will be joined by Karunanidhi, who's a senior advocate, Supreme Court, in a short while from now. We also have Brinda Adige, who's a social and women activist. We also have Kavita Srivastava, who's a female activist, who's a women's activist, and of course we have Susie Ben Shah, who represents, of course, the Shiv Sena, but she is the former chairperson of the Maharashtra State Commission for Women, and she is also the chairperson of Maharashtra State Commission for Protection of Child Rights. Thank you all of you for joining me on this show. To you, Susie Ben Shah, first, because you are in the midst of a storm there. Ma'am, when the POCSO Act was introduced, when it came about, there was a certain hope that this is probably the most child-friendly law that the country has seen. Of course, there was a lot of debate about how stringent the punishment were. Now, how important do you think that it is, it is for institutions to also be held accountable under this law when it comes to crime like what we saw in Thane, because, the school there had not really done any background checks?
You see, good evening to all and all your viewers. You see, here the basic contention is POCSO. Yes, it's and the JJ Act are essentially very child-friendly acts. Now, here what has happened is a systemic failure. There have been delay. There have been latches which cannot be condoned, and I am equally anguished and concerned as a woman politician, as a chairperson of Child Right Commission, and we are going to take strict action. I was personally there at Badlapur. The whole day I was there. Since I was there, the education officers were with his senior, and we have started a preliminary survey as to why the school should not be booked under the stringent act of POCSO, because having the knowledge, they then report to the police. The worst part, when the matter went to the police station, there was a delay of 12 hours when on the 16th, the little girl with the mother went to the police station. Our woman and child officer accompanied her.
Right.
Despite that. So you see, the point therefore here is that we must have a constructive discussion, a constructive suggestion, which I have made today, that unless and until in Maharashtra there is a parallel structure like a crime branch which only focuses towards women and children cases for women and children. When a concerned woman or maybe a child or with the relatives, parents come there, they have to be attended to sensitively. If you see the JJ Act, there is a provision of a child protection officer. But whenever a woman goes there, a child goes there, he's either on bandobast or some law and order situation or a theft FIR, you name it, and they are busy in that. So therefore, it is absolutely essential that a structure, a cadre, which only deals with women and child cases, they are there 24/7, and that is what I have written to the Home Minister. And I am very sure that this government, the sensitivity that they have always shown towards women and children, will take heed to this and get it done.
Right. That's a very good suggestion. Let me ask this question to Brinda Adige. Brinda Adige, do you think something like that will work? Because, a dedicated cadre working completely for the safety of women and children. And also, how important is it for crimes against women to be graded? Because, the language that we use, stalking, cannot be just seen as harassment, really, right? Because if there's a man who's stalking a woman continuously, when she's going out of her house, it's not just harassment, it's something beyond that. How important is it to have a dedicated cadre and also, for our crimes to be graded? Brinda ma'am, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Very important that we must have a dedicated cadre, a dedicated professional team. But with this professional team also comes the implementation mechanisms. Now we know that across India, we have women police stations. Now they don't have the wherewithal to register an FIR or investigate. They just put a bunch of people there and say, okay, women police station. That is not something that we want. We would like trained professionals who have all the wherewithal vis-a-vis the law to register a FIR, investigate, collect all the forensic evidence, and present it to court accordingly. Otherwise, just having people for women and child does not make any difference. We know that
No,
the
like a
laws
crime
call
branch,
for.
ma'am.
One moment.
Yes.
Like the crime branch, yes, you're absolutely right. For that, we also would like that the crime branch has a separate group of people investigating.
Yes.
But I think we need to have a complete set of people, a separate commissioner for children and women.
Right.
We have this in most developing countries as well as in countries that are developed. And India is not less than any of them.
Right.
We have the wherewithal, and for which we must have somebody like that. But that said, constant training, constant sensitization, and constant psychological evaluation is required.
Right.
Vacancies must be filled up, and
Right.
budgetary allocations must be made by both the state and the union government.
Now that's an important thing.
After
Karuna
that,
Nandi
we
also
need-
joins us now. Ms. Nandi, be it cases of dowry harassment, we have seen that, these extrajudicial compromises that happen also have become a reason for probably, low conviction rate because the pursuit of justice is so challenging for victims in this country. How do we address something like this? Because, I remember last time I interviewed you, we were talking about all women-only courts for alternative dispute resolution. How is that going to help? What is the solution to address something like this?
I think to make the process a lot less onerous and tough, right? To increase the conviction rate, to make punishment swift and certain, so that the only people who survive the complaint process and the prosecution are not only people who are very committed and almost activist in terms of their pursuit of justice, right? Because the average person finds it hard. But I also think that it's important in this moment for us to think about the fact that violence against women is an all of society, all of government problem. And the fact that there is a very correct rising against two governments of the opposite political persuasion. And it's entirely possible that part of it is being hijacked by politically motivated groups or whatever. But there is a very real anger at the fact that governments are failing completely in their duty. Why do these governments exist?
Right.
Surely the main purpose of their existence is to guarantee safety and freedom. So there are a number of things that they are not doing that are very low-hanging fruit. Preventing crimes is one of the big ones. Okay. Making sure, for example, that you're taking everything we know about reducing violence, working with boys, men,
right,
to reduce violence.
Right.
Right? To take out the kind of norm setting that's happened. That's one of the big ones, and none of it is happening.
Right.
None of it.
Right. Kavita Srivastav, that's a very important point Karuna is making. One of the guidelines that was issued by the West Bengal government also calls for minimizing night duties for women. I mean, this is of course regressive, and we saw that, even after, guidelines were issued by different medical hospitals, the Assam Silchar Medical Hospital asked women to be more careful. There's always talk about curfew. How important is it to kind of limit that kind of language and address that problem, because it's not the women's fault here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the whole approach is misplaced. The approach for ensuring safety for women is to cut down on the challenges that women need to experience, the challenges of the medical field that women need to experience, by doing maybe night shifts or doing whatever. So instead of looking at safety mechanisms, doing a safety audit, putting in place safety mechanisms. They are now withdrawing them from duty, and it's happened all over. It's happened in my state also. There's this horrible circular that 12 hours and no night shifts, all that rubbish has come. Doctors are already up in arms that this is not what we wanted. I really think that what we are not discussing is institutional mechanism. We need to talk of institutional mechanism and accountability. So where is the demand that safety audits ought to happen? I think every location will need a list of points to do the safety mechanism. For instance, if I'm a nurse in a PHC or I'm an A&M, my safety mechanism and the safety audit required for my security is something else than that required for a tertiary hospital like RT Car. We are not getting down to brass tacks.
Right.
This is the moment to actually really think through institutional mechanisms and the accountability.
Right.
We are not doing it. Politics has taken over.
Right.
Slogans, hang them, this, that. And yes, we have to, I mean, why is the FIR not being launched? It's not being launched because, again, are we making the police accountable? What do we do with police irregularities?
Yes,
We know
that
it in
was
the
something
rape
that
law,
the
we
CJI
got an
also
amendment.
raised yesterday.
We got an amendment.
Let me get in, Susie Ben here. Ma'am, you're also in politics. You know, today the ADR report says that as many as 151 sitting MPs and MLAs also have declared cases related to crimes against women in their affidavits, with West Bengal having the highest number of lawmakers. Of course, this could also be because, you know, maybe a large number of cases get reported there. How important is it for even lawmakers to be mindful of something like this?
Absolutely, I completely agree. And there is a statement made by a legislator of Maharashtra to a journalist, and we condemn as the strongest possible word. It doesn't matter whether it belongs to the ruling party or the Mahayuti. It just cannot be done. But yes, I tend to agree that for any protection policy for women and children, political will is absolutely necessary. After all, they are the lawmakers, they are the policy makers. And therefore, and the role of a commission and role of all women across party lines is very, very, very important that we come together. I've suggested today earlier with Barkha Dutt while I was talking, I suggested that women in Maharashtra, especially women politicians in Maharashtra, should come together, have a constructive dialogue, and how to have a crime branch type of a mechanism for women and children. Because after all, women and children are 70% of the population.
Right.
It amounts to 10 to 15% of the crime that happens against
Ms. Nandi,
them.
you know, when
So
it
as far
comes
as
to,
Maharashtra is
yes,
concerned,
Susie Ben was also talking about a dedicated cadre, and I would like to know from Ms.
Absolutely.
Nandi if she would also recommend something like that. But also one more question for you. When it comes to laws, do you think that there could be a balance between privacy and safety? Because, you know, the more we talk about more laws, some states have also asked to be empowered, but the proposed laws, especially in the case of Maharashtra that we saw during the regime of Uddhav Thackeray, there could be laws that would also mean more surveillance and location tracking. How do we balance something like that? Ms. Nandi?
I'm convinced. You're asking me, right?
Yeah, no, Ms. Nandi, yeah.
You know, I think that
Yes, sorry.
at the core of any lawmaking or any policy, make sure that we are working towards women's freedom and not women's protection, the answer will become clear, right? There are some cases in which for having a CCTV is unavoidable because there's maybe, you know, nothing else that would really help. But those are very, very few cases. Once we make sure that we're not locking women up at night, we are not taking away their night shifts and jobs that they do at night, and or, you know, wanting to go for a walk, or wanting to, for a young girl to go to or anyone to go to a party at night. As long as we have that at the center, that we are not looking to protect and lock up, etc., women and girls, answers immediately become clear.
Right.
Right?
Right. Brinda.
And therefore, I think,
yes,
therefore, I just want to say this very briefly, that, you know, tomorrow I will be in court for some of the Kolkata doctors. And what the order that the court has given is really excellent. But the thing is that this is not just about doctors, is it? It's also about two little 4-year-old girls.
Yeah. That's very
It's
important.
also about
Right.
Yes.
Brinda, there's one thing that Ms. Nandi also pointed out. And when you talk about use of technology, we keep talking about apps, we talk about location tracking, but all of that, of course, also concerns more scrutiny of women. How do you see the use of technology when it comes to safety of women? Is there a possibility that it can also be misused?
The technology is always misused, especially when there are no monitoring implementation. And if you look at technology in our country, yes, we do. We may have cyber police stations and we may have trained cyber police men and women, but we do not have stringent laws to address this. For instance, is there any way that pornography cannot be accessed by minors? There is no such law as such. Now, China does have something like that. So when you look at technology, yes, it is getting misused. And yes, very often our laws are not stringent enough. But that said, we must also understand that the kind of technology that is available and the speed with which this technological advances keep coming every day, it is not enough to only put barriers and monitoring. It is important that we speak to our children, to our young people, to our men and to our women. So education must begin. Now, nobody teaches kindergarten children about good touch and bad touch because somewhere in our conventional mindset, we keep saying that, let's not corrupt children. They don't know anything about this. So as a society, we still do not want to talk about this as a means of safety. How I can shout out loud if something like this is happening. We usually brush it off. And that is why this patriarchal, misogynistic, sexist language and actions get perpetrated again and again. Even now, in the case of Maharashtra, the management, no case has been filed on them because they have political connections. So the nexus is so strong between the state machinery and its systems and the politician that the general public is unable to even register an FIR because there is some political powerful person in that institution. Same thing that happened at RG Kar hospital.
Right. So there are some
Everything you
systemic
look at, the
structural
institutional
reforms that are needed. I'm
responsibility.
sorry, I'm running out of time. Thank you all of you for joining me on this show.